Well, hello, everybody. Universal greetings from here, us all here. We're just going to wait a second as everyone can uh, move in polite and orderly fashion from the lobby here into our virtual panel space. So thank you very much for taking time out to join us today. I see a few more of you coming in. So again, we'll just take a moment as people arrive. But hopefully we will see a lovely full room. I think we're expecting, I think there's over 50 of you here already based on numbers coming in. Who have we got here saying hello already? Let's have a quick look. Luca, I believe it is just your teams. I'm really sorry. Maybe try coming out and back in again. There we go. So I've gone straight to customer service chatbot mode as we're welcoming people in. I will introduce myself in a second. No, that's no problem. We're not singling you out. We're happy to help. So everything seems to be working technically from our end. We've done some checks. So if you are experiencing any problems or anything, please do just possibly try coming back in or out. Oh, some other people. So yes, we're definitely having a little bit of issues with some technical people as people just arrive. But I think everyone is getting that sorted out. If there's any advice or anything, we'll let you know. But I think what we're going to do is go straight now let's get into the panel. Right. So yes, there's some advice there in terms of if you quickly want to check in the chat, there is some advice, I believe, on if you're having issues with sound, but hopefully everybody here can hear us. Thank you very much for coming and welcome to the King's Festival of Artificial Intelligence. You've joined us today for this panel, AI Dreams and Sci-Fi Nightmares, or indeed, I'm guessing, AI Nightmares and Sci-Fi Dreams. I had a lot of trouble deciding which way around to put that. Went with AI Dreams and Sci-Fi Nightmares, possibly because those could be hallucinating AIs that are dreaming, and that is a total sci-fi nightmare. But perhaps also we're going to say sci-fi dreams because we are living, for some people, in an AI nightmare right now. But perhaps science fiction is a means for us to dream our way to a better place if only enough creative people can lead us in that direction. I am your host for the next hour. My name is Tom Hunter. I'm the director of the Arthur C. Clarke Award Science Fiction Book of the Year. And for anyone who is just listening along, a quick description of myself. First of all, I am human. I've identified a lot of traffic lights online in my time, so I can guarantee you I'm definitely not a robot. My pronouns are he, him. I'm white, and I'm wearing black-rimmed spectacles and talking against the backdrop here on my teams of the Tyrell Corporation pyramid from the film Blade Runner, who, of course, motto is more human than human. So when I tell you I'm human, I promise you I am. But who knows? Maybe we'll find out. So I'm especially delighted for the Clarke Award to be invited to be a part of on this festival for this week, as Sir Arthur himself actually studied right here at King's, doing mathematics and physics back in the 40s, and it's a fantastic way for us to connect with his legacy and with his memory here today. So I really do appreciate everybody coming out and joining us. And finally, I am also currently employed at King's, as well as being an award director. I'm working in what's known as King's Innovation Catalyst. And I mention this because King's Innovation Catalyst is all about taking King's researchers and connecting them with industry and funders to look at real-world solutions that will serve society and make the world a better place, which is all part of King's bigger mission, but also has created for me quite a dilemma between those two hats that I wear in my professional career. On the one hand, I'm seeing some of the amazing work that King's is doing, especially in the fields of artificial intelligence, and how that might have quite game-changing benefits for us as humanity going into the future. But equally, from the creative industries, from the publishing industries, we're seeing a massive rush to the bottom in what we might call AI slop content being spoon-fed to us across the internet, and of course the vast copyright infringement or / theft that is currently going on in order to set up and train a lot of those large language models. So can we square that glowing red AI circle? That's what the panel's about today. And without further ado, I would like to ask my panel to introduce themselves briefly. I'm going to start, as you seem to be unmuted, with you, Suw Charman-Anderson. A quick word about yourself.
That teaches me right for not being muted. So my name's Suw Charman-Anderson, and I'm the founder of Ada Lovelace Day, which is an international celebration of the achievements of women in science, technology, engineering, and maths. And I'm also a writer. I'm currently working with the universities of York and Edinburgh on an eco-sitcom called Fieldwork, which aims to put scientists into their natural context, out in the field, getting bitten by hawfinches and failing to find bats. I've got quite a long history with technology. I started working in the technology world in about 1998. And yeah, thank you, Tom, for inviting me, and thank you everyone for coming.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. I think I will move to Stuart, if that's okay.
Hi there, I'm Stuart Hotston. I wear a variety of hats. I'll start with being a writer, an author, and a literary critic. And I have kind of several novels out and kind of probably 4 more coming in the next 2 years, nearly all of which are kind of science fiction, whether they are very far future or day after tomorrow, depends on the mood that's taking me at the time, to be honest. My background is I was a research physicist for like a fairly short amount of time, got my PhD, did a bit of kind of research, decided it wasn't for me, partly because my grandmother said to me, when are you going to get a proper job? And so I went into finance, which is arguably not necessarily better. I have been working in investment banking and in derivatives specifically for the last 20 odd years. Whilst doing all of these things, just for those who might want to know, I am quite bald. I'm male presenting, and I am wearing a dark blue shirt with some white flowers on it.
Fantastic, thank you, Stu. Tiana, if I might invite you to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, hello. My name's Tiana Lee. I'm a PhD student here at King's, and I'm looking at fairness in AI for cardiac imaging. My background is I studied biomedical engineering at King's, so I've been in the department for a long time, bit of a veteran, and I'm coming to the end of my PhD. I'm generally interested in AI and how it can go wrong. Yeah, that's me. Oh, if you want a description of me, I'm a Black woman. I'm currently wearing glasses and a dark maroonish t-shirt.
Thank you, Tiana. I guarantee you we're going to get onto how AI can go wrong very shortly, I suspect. And Cavill, if I might ask you to finally introduce yourself. Thank you.
So, big hello to everybody. I'm Cavill Road. I'm a professor of biomedical engineering at King's London, and I'm a big technology fan. I guess a hoarder of technology. I think that's how my wife would describe it. And so I got all sorts of gadgets dating back from sort of 60s to modern day tech. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, and I like to think of my job as making sci-fi to sci-fact. So we take a lot of inspiration from sci-fi. In fact, a lot of projects that I've recently done are all based off moments that occurred after watching something in a sci-fi movie. I could actually make that for real. Description of me, I am an Indian man in his 50s, black and white beard. I've still got a little bit of hair left, but not much. And I have a backdrop, which is from Space Odyssey 2001, one of my.
Fantastic. Thank you, Cavill. Now, I saw a few messages coming in here saying that you are quite quiet on that. So I might just take a moment to, if you perhaps have a headset or something to adjust some sound things, because you're definitely coming through quietly for quite a few people there. So this also gives you the opportunity to not be next for my first proper question. So I'll just give you a moment. So before we get really into sort of the current issues around AI and science fiction, I did want to take a little bit of a moment for everyone to talk about some of their favorite or most influential or most villainous, least favorite AI moments in popular science fiction in any mode, whether it's literature, whether it's film. quite obviously, I have to pick HAL 9000 from the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, as created inspirationally by Sir Arthur C. Clarke. And one of the reasons that I must pick him is because in many ways, quite a lot of the ways we talk about AI in science fiction are still linked back to that from the 1960s, or we're looking at things like Skynet and the Terminator and all of these kind of things. And it's definitely, I think, a feeling that here we are in 2025, perhaps science fiction needs to be able to move beyond those tropes and those modes into newer forms of writing about science fiction. So I'm certainly hoping if there are any writers or budding writers in the audience today, you might find some stuff that will take you beyond those tropes and through into new inspiration. But perhaps I could ask you, Stu, to kick us off as our resident science fiction writer with some favorite, most inspirational moments from science fiction for yourself. And you're muted, Stu.
I would probably go all the way back to the 1950s in Japan and go for Astro Boy, who is a little lifelike automaton, but he has a personality. The whole setting is one where robots are citizens. You will have seen that very recently, kind of reinvented in Gareth Evans' film The Creator, which is essentially Astro Boy in live action. But there was also a Netflix anime called Pluto, which again, it sits very much in the Astro Boy setting. What I really like about those is that they, and this, starting in the 1950s, moved past the question of whether these entities are intelligent, and they are much more focused on how do we live amongst each other. And I think that honestly is probably the more interesting question. But I just wanted to say I also have a most villainous, and it's the Aperture Science Corporation from the game Portal, by the same people who created Half-Life. And the reason I think it's important that we think about that one is because it's a corporation and it has AI elements. But corporations are artificial intelligences as well. We delegate our thinking to them, we delegate our decision making to them, and no one individual typically has control over the whole thing. They are autonomous machines that we have created and have had with us for a long time.
Fantastic, thanks, Stu. Cavill, I'm going to come to you next. Partly, let's check out those sound levels.
Okay, so hopefully my mic is good, because
that's
AI
good,
of Teams had chosen my headphone mic. But there we go. Hopefully you can hear me better now.
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
So one of my favorite sci-fi sort of series, I guess, is Battlestar Galactica. It is. The original is quite a few decades old, but it was reworked by recently, and I like the prequel story, which is a series called Caprica. Not many people have watched it, so if you haven't seen it, go out and see it, because it basically tells the story of the creation of the robot AI in Battlestar Galactica, the Cylon, who basically humans create, and then they basically decide to destroy their creator, as as you do if you're really, really clever AI. And so Caprica tells the story of the first Cylon, and it's basically a scientist who loses his daughter and is building a really smart robot, and then basically downloads the daughter's brain into this robot, and that actually then becomes the first Cylon. So it was like an innocent creation of a technology to keep a human person effectively alive, that then goes and becomes self-aware, autonomous, and then results in the destruction of the human race in the end. So that's one of my favorite stories. It's well worth a watch if you haven't seen it.
Some connections to the medtech industry there in terms of the keeping a human alive bit, maybe not the then going on to destroy the entire population.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's a huge connection, because at the moment we've got this global project where we're mapping every single neuron in the mammalian brain, starting off with a small like a rodent's brain, so brain mapping project. So we can map all of these, and then we can effectively have enough computing power to simulate it. And effectively, we've got ourselves a replica, a digital twin of the brain, and we can then, of course, connect that to a mechanical system and build a cyborg. And so I'm pretty sure we're not that far off.
Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to come to you, Tiana, for this question. Favorite science fictional characters or AI instances?
Yeah, so I think my first one would be this character called Ava from the film Ex Machina.
Yes.
Came out in, I think, 2014. It's made by a guy called Alex Garland. And it's a great film. It's about this humanoid robot who's trying to pass the Turing test, and she kind of gains consciousness and tries to escape. And I thought that was just such a cool like concept of creating a robot that's so intelligent that it no longer wants to be around human and wants to be free. I think my second one is not so much AI, it's more science fiction. It's a film called Gattaca, where the world is they try and make these perfect humans by genetic editing. And there's the main character who hasn't been genetically edited, and it's about his sort of survival in that world. So those would be my two picks.
Two of my favourites as well, although the fact that you've now mentioned that Ex Machina was 2014 has depressed me utterly, as it still feels like a contemporary film I saw just the other day. And Sue, if I might come to you next.
Yeah, so sorry, I forgot my physical description for anyone who's just listening. So I am a blonde woman wearing red with a planetary background behind me. And, I had to think quite hard about this question because in my mind, when the term AI in science fiction comes up, I think of HAL, I think of Skynet from Terminator. And I realize actually, if I go back far enough, it's my sort of first and fondest memory of AI in science fiction is Marvin, the paranoid android from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I also realized that in my mind, at least, I sort of split like AI sentience into kind of one area, which is disembodied sentiences, and then had very neatly put humanoid robots and androids in their own own little category, where I was kind of like, well, is that AI? Is that not AI? It doesn't feel like AI. It doesn't feel like AI, maybe because they look human. So I had to think quite hard about it. But I think, Marvin, I love Marvin because he is super intelligent and is being asked to do very menial things. And yeah, I understand why he was depressed. And I always wished that Marvin had a happier path through life.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you, Sue. Now, I'm going to apologise slightly to all of my panel as I suggest a slight order, but I want to take a segue already because I've noticed that we've all picked humanoid examples of AI on the whole. All four of you have leant into that kind of direction. And even with my pick with HAL 9000, Anthony Daniels, the actor who played C-3PO, another AI humanoid, famously called that the best ever performance on screen by a red light bulb. So still a humanoid kind of element there. And I just wanted to pick up a little bit on Sue's point around that kind of when we think of AI versus how we think about robotics that might be AI-based. What is that? Where does that kind of division come from? I mean, maybe Sue, you could just talk a little bit more about that first, and then I could open that up to the rest of the panel. And apologies, I've gone off topic already.
I think for me, it was about embodiment versus disembodiment. So the AIs that are, they're a computer system, and maybe you have a voice, maybe it's some other interface, but they tend to be sort of omniscient, to some extent omnipotent. They have kind of godlike qualities, which makes them, very sort of antithetical to humanity. Humanity is not meant to be like a god, whereas androids are they're humanoid, so they're kind of more like us, but also they're kind of killable in a sort of easier way. You blow up C-3PO, much as no one ever wants that to happen, and he is basically toast. So it maybe is more relatable because there is a sense of sort of knowability and a sense of mortality to humanoid AIs that you maybe don't get from HAL or Skynet.
And Carol, if I might come to you on that sort of similar kind of thing. So obviously, from a biomedical point of view, humans are augmenting themselves in some way. So I wondered, are these kind of conversations coming? Are humans feeling more human than human, less human as they become? What's kind of the experience as we start talking about augmenting ourselves in a sort of a medical health tech kind of way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, at the moment, the technology that's in the sort of more public domain, it aims at trying to restore lost capability to humans. So, human machine interfaces, neural implants, all these types of things. They're just trying to give back lost functionality. But we could think maybe not in the public domain, maybe for other purposes, such as defense purposes, there is that potential to get the augmentation and create the superhuman. And I think that's a reality already. I mean, we might not know about it, and certainly the use of things like exoskeletons to increase capabilities of soldiers and so forth. And this is already probably there, and certainly will be more in the future. I guess the ethics around this has got to be very carefully looked at, right?
Absolutely. Tiana or Stu, would you like to come on this one before I get us back on track?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is really about us versus God. Disembodied AIs are nearly always godlike. They're nearly always deeply threatening or judgmental in some way. In literature, they're not always, but there's a plethora of material showing them as being dangerous, as being outside of human control. You might say God, you might say the universe, but it's the other. It's the grand other, with powers beyond human. Whereas the robot, whether it's Crichton or whether it's Deckard or whoever it might be, they are us. They are reflections of who we are, but also reflections of who we'd like to be, the things we'd like to escape from, etc., etc. I do think that they like too often, at least from my perspective as someone who engages with this type of fiction, they're too often reflections of our type of intelligence as well. So there are very many types of intelligence out there in the world, but most of them unfortunately get judged by what we think of as human intelligence as the default. And most examples of AI are the same. They are essentially, well, what would a human look like if it didn't have a body, or what would a human look like if it had a super body? And so they are just reflections of us. And I kind of go back to Cavill's point a little bit, which is, look, we've been transhumanist since someone decided that fire was good for cooking meat. Everything that isn't part of your body is a technology, and the application of that technology is giving you capacities and capabilities that you haven't had in the past, or you wouldn't have had in the past. So if we take one step back from the exoskeleton and think about the rifle versus a spear, or a spear versus a short sword, or a short sword versus someone up close with a sling, that these things are all steps forward in kind of increasing the capability of the human body to do things, in that particular case, deal violence to another human body. But and so I think it's helpful to see AI as the end, like kind of an end process of that kind of journey, which starts kind of very early in human history.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, so Tiana, I do want to give you the chance to come in on this one as well, but equally, the next question is going to be aimed at you first, so it's up to you.
I just have a small thing to add to both Stu and Cavill, is that I often like to think about, before I go to sleep, how many changes can we make to the human body before it becomes more of a sort of humanoid sort of thing, like a ship of Theseus. How many different changes can we make before we become unrecognizable as humans? That keeps me up at night.
Well, Cavill, would anyone like to come in on that? That is a great question.
Well, I think the question I always ask myself is one thing is like what's your, like a question like what's your native language? If you speak many languages, what's your native language? And the question I ask myself is like, what language do I think in? So again, as long as we think like humans, I guess the appearance is not, and the augmentation might not be an issue, but if we think like humans, then we are humans. That's my take on it anyway.
Fantastic, thank you. Anyone else? I'm allowing the conversation to flow.
Yeah, I kind of come back to the I'm not interested in the primacy of the human. So I think I agree with Cavill. If you're thinking like a human, you're a human, but that leaves all sorts of other options off the table. kind of potentially. I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, Cavill, but there is a little bit of a default that we go to, which is, and there's some chat about augmented intelligence. There's still that defaulting to, well, it's human intelligence that we're augmenting, and I'm like, nah, you know, that you do recreate the brain, but then you forget about the gut biome and the neurons in the gut, and you know, there's all sorts of challenges here about what it means to define those things, and what it means to be human intelligence versus dog intelligence or even tree intelligence. So I think that I would say there's a lot of primacy around human intelligence. There's no reason that AI, if we ever reach the point of general intelligence, would look anything like us, especially if it's not embodied in the way a human is embodied.
Can I also add, when we talk about augmenting humans, we're generally talking about augmenting humans that are already fit and capable. We're not generally then looking at, say, people with disabilities or with limitations through aging and enabling them not to live an augmented life in the sense of having superhuman powers, but just being able to get back to living the life they want to live with the capacities that they want to have. And you know, I think about kind of elderly people that struggle to walk, and you know, if we're talking about AI not just as replicating the brain but other parts of the body, then where does the AI fit in, say, an exoskeleton that stops someone falling over and gives them the ability to walk without that fear? And I think there's a whole sort of chunk of AI that I've literally never thought of until just this second about how would that work, because it's not a purely mechanical problem. There's also an intelligence problem there as well.
Well, fantastic. Thank you, everyone. A quick pause to say thank you for everyone who's just having a massive conversation in the chat as well. I'm trying to follow it, but I might just have to go back and pull a lot of that out. I suspect, because I can see the little red dot that says you found the Q&A button option as well. If you have a particular question for our panelists, and I see a lot of you do, please do feel free to put something into that or vote up something that you like as well. And we'll definitely try and make sure that we've got time to come to some of those great points, because you're as host, you're making my job very easy for me. Thank you very much so far, everybody, for this, with those questions and my panelists. I'm going to move on to our next question now, and there's a reference to Sir Arthur C. Clarke. In one of his 3 laws, he famously said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. But of course, we're not here today to talk about magic. We're here to talk about science fiction and science. So let's use that as an opportunity to break through some of the hype, the spiel, the selling of contemporary AI, and get under the hood a little bit into, not from the magic, but actually what are some of the issues in these advanced technologies. And I wanted to ask Tiana to lead us off on this one, talking specifically about her research into biases within AI algorithms. So Tiana, if I could ask you to perhaps just explain a little bit about the specifics of your work for us first and lead us off.
Yeah, so I look at biases in AI, and this can be all sorts of bias. It can be representation bias, it can be sampling bias, where the data set you have isn't representative of the wider population, which occurs quite often in training AI models. And so I look specifically at cardiac imaging. I'm in the biomedical engineering department. And one of the main things that worries me about the use of AI is that we've already seen that biases that we have are replicated in models that we've built. So, for example, very early on, ChatGPT was kind of spewing quite hateful and damaging language to users that were having conversations with it. It still, at the moment, repeats medically inaccurate sort of terms and beliefs. So, for example, some that come from slavery, like Black people having thicker skin, it still repeats this if you ask it if there are skin thickness differences between Black and white people. And this is just due to the training data that we've given it. So this is one of my main concerns with the use of AI, is that it reflects very human biases, and we like to think that it's unbiased and this wonderful solution to a lot of problems, but there are quite a few biases that still remain.
Fantastic, thank you. And I know, Stu, if I don't mind me coming to you next, we're not talking just about the purity of the data, but also some perhaps the options of where that data is coming from, and the some of the people who are leading us into the AI revolution, as it were.
Yeah, sure. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I'll try and not go
I'll
down
pull
too
you back,
far.
but don't worry.
And I'll start by recommending two books. One is called Bring the War Home by Kathleen Belew. That's Belew. And the other one is called Speculative Whiteness by Sean J. Carroll. I think both of those books should be required reading because they talk about that. So Speculative Whiteness is about how our tech bro friends, if you'll allow me to use that shorthand, which I think people will recognize as representing a certain set of people, how they look at science fiction and how they look at technology and how they have integrated that into a sense of white supremacy. Quite a few of those people, like Mark Andreessen and others, are white supremacists and have made no bones about that. And they are pushing, like a number of those people are pushing AIs on that basis. A great example this last week has been Grok, which is Elon Musk's version of ChatGPT, where he has instructed he's instructed his engineers to insist that the white genocide of the Boers is a real thing and that it shouldn't be controversial. Sarah, it was Speculative Whiteness, and it was Bring the War Home by Kathleen Belew. I think that's really important because what we see here is, from a user's perspective, essentially a black box, and what we don't see is the kind of the political ideologies going into the background. At the moment, on Grok, someone asked about a speech the Pope made where he said there should be less war in the world, and Grok absolutely took that speech round and said, hey, the Pope has said this, and that's not really a fair reflection of white genocide in South Africa. And there's been a whole bunch of kind of examples like that. I think to take examples like that, it means that we've got people who are coming at this with a very specific mindset. It would take too long to go into kind of the techno superiority and that comes into that, but it's very it's kind of very clearly laid out that these are some of the pathways that people are coming to this from. And so when they see bias in the data, they don't see that as a problem. They don't even see it as bias. They see that as a truth that they accept and recognize. And so it's not for them a bug to be taken out. It's a feature to be maintained and preserved. And that, I think, is something that we don't talk enough about because to do a really silly example, a friend of mine is an editor, a TV editor. You'll have absolutely seen some of the shows that he's worked on. And he was, for a tabletop RPG he wanted to create a red wizard without a beard. And he wanted it he wanted it to be male presenting, but he asked ChatGPT, I can't remember who it was, but he asked them to create a red wizard without a beard, and he couldn't get it to create a red wizard without a beard. Even when it was telling him it had created a red wizard without a beard, it was showing him a red wizard with a beard. And I said, well, was the wizard always male? And he said, oh, yes, of course the wizard was always male. And I said, oh, could you see if it would produce a female red wizard without a beard? No, he could get a beard without a wizard, but he couldn't get a wizard without a beard. And I think those sorts of things are really deeply subtle, but they speak to structural problems in how that data is being processed by what is effectively a statistical engine.
So this reminds me of the conversation that we were having, of course, about the naming of many of the AI services that we now have, Siri and Alexa being the obvious ones. And I wondered, given your capacity as the founder of Ada Lovelace Day, the first programmer in history and also a woman, whether you might speak to that for us slightly more.
Yeah, sure. And just to clarify, I'm not the first programmer in history. It was Ada Lovelace.
No, sorry, that is what I meant. I realised I said that, but I meant that as Ada Lovelace as the first programmer.
Yes.
No,
that's all right. Just wanted to be clear. So yeah, I had a look, and actually the issues with digital assistants, as they were initially called, it goes back to 2016 or before, when The Atlantic was talking about how Siri, Alexa, Cortana all have these very feminine names. You even have like the Echo. And Echo, of course, was a Greek mountain nymph. And she is kind of part of the story of Narcissus, and that sort of feminization of technology that's in a service role is something that's been sort of a problem for some considerable time. And then now we're moving into these tools having more capability. There is a question there about how we are gendering tools, and not necessarily now so much in the name. I think a lot of, I would find it hard to think that Grok would be a female name, but just in the way that we are treating them, but also in the way that when you look at AI companies, they are very male dominated in senior roles, and indeed some companies that have had ethics teams questioning what they're doing with their AI. I'm thinking, ethics teams that are made up of women predominantly, those women have been fired from their roles and the ethics teams dissolved. So I think there is a real gender problem. And, we also see that not just in, in the naming and in the personnel, but you see the sexism in the output in the same way that a lot of AI tools are racist, they're also sexist. So if you ask an AI tool, what a scientist looks like, it's going to come back with the same kind of ideas that you get when you ask school children, which is largely Einstein. So these biases are so firmly baked in right now. And I think, said earlier, as Stuart said, that's not necessarily seen as a bug by the companies doing this, because they're not just white supremacists, they're male supremacists as well. So for them, if they are reframing women as servants, as subservient, that's fine by them, because that's actually how they want us to be in real life.
Thank you, Sue. Cavill, would you like to comment on this question?
Well, I don't want to. I'm just thinking about this, and I'm thinking that actually, just in terms of technology, it's interesting how it is assigned a sex historically. If you think of a lot of tech, it gets assigned that way, and maybe it's all to do with historically that the tech's being made by males, I guess, and therefore they want to make that assignment. So it's not a topic I've thought very hard about, but suddenly it just comes to it comes to the fore, thinking, yeah, actually a lot of machines, they have a sex, and often it's a female identity, right? So but it must be, it's obviously the bias is in the fact that it was mainly male created, I guess.
I think it's time to go back to the biomedical labs in St Thomas's Hospital and just do some reassigning of names.
Renaming,
yes.
Gender reassignment to the tech.
So I'm going to move us on, and I've in my research, I've been looking at a whole plethora of different AI things. I want to sort of switch us to the other side now, to possibly more positives. I was recently reading an essay by Ken Liu, who is a science fiction writer, well known for the story which went on to become the film Arrival, if anyone knows his work or has seen that film. And there, to paraphrase the essay very briefly, he was talking about AI's moment right now in terms of the creative industries and something that's been very akin to very early cinema, so single framed shots of people just performing everyday actions, but being recorded, and that being the magic, as it were, which is very much like early prototypes, not seen as an entertainment medium, potentially seen much more as a way of recording for scientific study almost, and this kind of thing. And his point is that perhaps at that early beginning, there's no way of anticipating where we might go creatively with these kind of tools. People were seeing photography, film as things that would collapse industries, as we're having those conversations now, painting and so on and so forth. But I wanted to think outside of the damage that we're seeing LLM tools, let's say specifically, and sort of image generation, text generation, and so on. What perhaps are some of the potentials? And this could be from an educational kind of background for the creative industries in terms of you, Stu, Sue, as writers. So opportunities that you might see or might want to see, or perhaps again, that kind of idea of how do you keep the human in there, the human doing the hard work. And again, one thing I've sort of seen a lot of instances of is this idea of it is about still doing the work. And using AI tools in your creative practice is sometimes akin to paying someone else to go to the gym for you, and it's never going to give you the ultimate benefits. I don't know who wants to come in on this one. I realise I've rambled a question statement at you, which I'm normally very apologetic for, so I apologise. But would anyone like to take a lead on some optimism around how AI might assist us in our practice, whether scientific research or creative?
Well, I could talk to scientific
Please.
research because, I could talk to both. So let's start off with the creativity. So one of the things as engineers that we do is we design stuff, and we use computer-aided design packages. And just in recent years, Gen AI has crept into the CAD packages where you can literally specify what you want designed, and the Gen AI will go and do it for you. So you can say, I want a spur gear with so many sprockets and teeth angle this and whatever, and it will go and do it. So it's actually going to save you a lot of time. So you might have taken some minutes to do that, but then it's become seconds. So that's a great example of, in terms of creative use of AI, to build designs where actually it's beneficial because it's just raw time saving, and that is always a good thing when you've got a lot of tasks to accomplish. And in research, I think there obviously we're building research tools that incorporate AI, and we work in healthcare, and we know that how impactful these things are. They're tools that are being developed to basically help humans to make decisions or to save time and save resources. And of course, all of those things are so important in the current climate of healthcare service, where we're having huge cuts, effective cuts taking place, and it's technology, and particularly AI tools and automated agents that are going to come and are going to be able to basically deliver the service that we need to meet the demand. So I think there's a lot of good story happening, so there's no real sort of dark story at the moment on that side, as long as we are very careful with the ethics of everything, right?
Fantastic. Perhaps Tiana, I could come back to you on that one and keep us on a sort of biomedical theme for a moment before going to the creative industry side.
Yeah, so I would agree with everything Cavill said. I can speak for me personally. I'm coming to the end of my PhD, but most of what I did was coding, and it can be quite a long, drawn-out process. And what I found is that just by using ChatGPT, I can speed up a lot of the things that I would do, a lot of repetitive code, a lot of things that I know how to do, but it's somewhere in the back of my mind. So I see it more of as a productivity tool. I would say in terms of education, because I'm also a teaching assistant, or I have assisted with teaching, it's a bit of a fine line to walk, because there's a difference between using it as a tool, which is what I see it as, and using it as a crutch. So I tend to only use sort of LLMs and AI for things that I could do myself, but it helps with productivity. I also think, because my work is looking at bias, that it's a massive improvement in terms of access. So there are lots of people around the world that would have been completely shut out from doing experiments and scientific investigations, just because they don't have access to, for example, education that would allow them to learn about, for example, deep learning methods. But with the use of LLMs, they can learn quite easily. Of course, you have to have access to the internet, but I think just access in general has been widened for a lot of people, which I see as a very good thing.
Fantastic. Stu or Sue?
So I personally, I don't use any AI of any sort that I know of in any of my creative processes. My general feeling is that I don't write in order to have written, much as I love the end product. I'm writing to figure out how I think and what I think, and finding ways to express myself, and hopefully improving my ability to express myself. And I think AI steals that away from me. The process is important, and the learning that I get from that is important. And this for me extends to things like Audible just announced that they're going to do end-to-end AI audiobooks, and I've gone the other way. So I kind of, for fun, I write books for Welsh learners in Welsh, And I'm currently working with an accent coach to improve my Welsh accent. As you can probably tell, I'm not Welsh. But if I can improve my Welsh accent to the point where I can record my own audiobooks, not only do I get to more economically record my own audiobooks, I also get a better accent when I'm speaking Welsh. It's win-win as far as I'm concerned. I could try and use an AI, but it would probably be pretty awful. So for me, I feel like we are going to see a part of the audience that puts a premium on human-made content and, you know, books and audiobooks and what have you. And I think maybe one of the good things that's coming out of this is perhaps a wider understanding of how much hard work goes into writing a book, because I do feel like there's an awful lot of everyone's got a book in them, everyone should write a book, when actually it is really, really hard work. It takes a long time, and maybe writers have been a little bit underappreciated, and maybe this will help us understand just how hard it really is to write a novel or a screenplay or record an audiobook.
Now, Stu, you've always made it look really easy, but I assume that's not the case. Over to you. Anything to add?
So I think there are use cases for LLMs specifically. I think those are nearly always in with closed pools of data, looking at very specific stuff, such as analyzing artifacts in complex data sets. I think I don't think for me, so I don't use AI in any context, creative context. Clearly, things like transcription on Zoom, spell check, those are all they kind of fit into that very basic machine learning space. So at the edges, there's stuff that, you know, I've certainly been using, and that's fine. But none of that is stuff where I would have needed to think, or where I am relying on facts being important. I think crucially, we need to separate out the generic stuff that's in the mainstream that people are thinking about, because those are just statistical engines. There's no thought there. There's no capability of learning. All there is refining the statistical probability of the next item in the sequence, or the next link in the chain. Whether that's right or wrong is not part of the mathematics. It's irrelevant. I'm not interested in using that sort of AI for anything. But where you've got closed systems, where you've got data analytics going on, I think that's actually a really good use of it, because it's the type of stuff that a human will be going, I've got 2 billion pieces of data in this data set. I don't quite know how to sort it. There's no efficient way of sorting it. The algorithms I've got are going to take me months, and I still don't know whether I'm going to look at. I still don't know whether I'm asking the right questions. Having data like algorithms that can help you do that rapidly, based upon your criteria you set them, and that they can kind of self police and kind of determine, like evolve themselves over time to be better at that. I think that's really interesting. There's also kind of really, like thinking about science fiction, there are definite kind of cases in science fiction, right? So fly-by-wire is really tough. And that's really tough in 2 dimensions or 3 dimensions when you're flying close to the Earth's surface in a fighter jet. If you're thinking about plotting navigation in space, it's beyond human capability. Like, honestly, we see it in science fiction films, so we think it's something human brains can do. Human brains aren't designed for thinking at fractions of the speed of light in 3 dimensions and avoiding sort of stellar debris. They're just not made for that. So if for those sorts of things where human brains run out and it's simply about processing power, those sorts of models, again, I think are things that we would absolutely end up relying on. And it kind of comes back to something I said to the AI people at IBM last year, which is I want AI in my normal life to be doing the stuff that A, I don't want to do, B, is really, really boring, and C, therefore frees me to do art and creativity and research and thinking for myself. Like it's almost like UBI, right? But in terms of doing tasks that I don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen many people sort of say, like, I want the AI to do all the chores, and I seem to be doing all the chores, and it's doing all the content creation and creativity, but badly. I'm going to go to questions, the Q&A in our last 10 minutes here, but a quick shout out. I'm trying to read all of your comments in the chat as well. Thank you so much for all of them. A special shout out to Emma, who has posted a link to her blog on audiobook narrating. Now, Emma, I was reading that just this morning, so thank you. I would have referenced it if I had time to add it in my notes. And also, you've said there, I'm an author. You're a Clarke Award shortlisted author. So hello, everyone should please go and check out Emma's link in the chat there. But let's have a look, if we may, and let's go over to the Q&A. Give me just a second. And let's see where we are up top there. Assuming it's going to load for me. I'm now watching a spinning circle. Death. Right. Right. Not many votes here, but let's see. Science fiction often explores the boundaries of consciousness. Could the panelists share their perspectives on what they think defines human consciousness? For speed, I'm just going to ask one person to take that. How might AI consciousness differ from our own? Anyone want to crack at that quickly? Stu.
I've written about that, like both the
Fantastic.
Tangles game, but also my upcoming novel coming out later this year from Angry Robot called Project Hanuman. For me, the most important thing is to think about the fact that human intelligence is instantiated. We are in a body. We have a physical presence, and that intelligence is rooted and threaded through that body. And I think we underestimate that. There's too much talk about being uploaded as if we could live it unembodied, and that would make sense to us. I am deeply skeptical that could be the case. I think, and I think that is where we kind of blush. If you think of human consciousness as not understood to start with, but secondly, as something that's probably, I tend to think of it as a emergent phenomenon, and I can't say much more than that because I don't think we can really substantiate that. The field's moving very quickly. Then I think emergent kind of self-reflexive kind of intelligence is kind of a mark of what intelligence is, that idea of it. Raymond Tallis was a gerontologist and philosopher who died kind of probably about 4 or 5 years ago. He wrote a book called The Hand, and in that he wrote a trilogy, but the first one was The Hand, and there was a trilogy of kind of philosophy. And he there talks about the idea that intelligence has to kind of be able to look at itself and go, I am this thing here. But that, I think, is a definition of human intelligence. There's no real reason why distributed intelligence or hive type intelligences, or even very slow, long time intelligences would look at themselves in that sort of way. And when I say long time types of intelligence, I think of intelligences that might take a century to kind of figure something out, to kind of act as agents. And I think that is, like, there's very many types of intelligence out there. I think the blurred lines are about what it means to be human are interesting, but I think they're more interesting when we consider, well, if I have, my golden retriever has just disappeared, he's left the room, but when I consider myself next to him, the blurred lines between the types of intelligences that we represent, I think is really interesting and a more fruitful question for us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Stu, and thank you for the question. I mean, obviously, that's a huge lot to unpack there in terms of potential science fiction stories of the future, which leads me very quickly on to another question, which says AI stories are often bleak and cautionary. True. What would a truly hopeful AI story look like? And I'll open this up to anyone. If you were in Waterstones tomorrow looking for truly positive AI-based fiction, what would you be looking for? What would you hope to see?
So I'd like to answer this because this actually speaks directly to the sitcom that I'm writing, Fieldwork, which is trying to look at a more hopeful look at the environment, biodiversity loss, bioabundance, and these sorts of issues that are often portrayed very, very bleakly in the media. It's all about what's gone wrong instead of what we could be doing right. And I would love to see more stories around AI helping us to better understand how to reverse climate change, how to increase biodiversity. We actually do have a lot of those answers there. So this is not necessarily about asking AIs for answers. This is about solutions. So how do we enact these answers? I I think at the moment, I mean, ironically, yesterday, I think it was Natural England released a new peat map of the UK, which is fundamentally wrong. Like it's mapped solid granite as deep peat, and it's just like, how did that happen? So stories about how humans can responsibly use AI to work out what the most effective way to enact solutions to climate and biodiversity issues. I would love to see a lot more of that.
Cavill or Tiana, any positive stories you would send you spending out book tokens?
I put in the chat. Well, it's a film. It's Bicentennial Man. I love that movie, and I think it's a real positive spin on AI, humanoid AI and human interaction, and it's a very it's a lovely story. And if those of you who haven't seen that movie, you should definitely watch it.
Tiana?
I was just thinking of a film that I've seen. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but it's about a robot that looks after an old man who is just slowly aging. If anyone can remember the name of this film or knows what I'm talking about, please put it in the chat.
Is that Frankenrobot?
I think so, yes. So things like that, where we have sort of humanoid robots that can help and care, and as Cavill was saying earlier, kind of help to improve healthcare. That would be my sort of ideal positive story.
Absolutely. I mean, it's worth remembering that Hal himself even is technically a life support AI as well as piloting the ship, although he does kind of obviously go slightly astray there. I think time for one more question. It's a biggie. Do we think artists will be replaced by AI in the near future? I say artists in its broadest sense, including design as well, and engineering, but it's the creative practices and humans. Do we think we're going to get replaced?
I have a very quick answer to this. I think personally, this is my personal opinion, I think a lot of generated AI images and videos and films are complete slop and completely worthless, because I see art as a human expression, and it comes from our consciousness and our lived experience. And so I don't think artists are going to be replaced. I think the nature of art might change, but in my opinion, I think art is something that is very human.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. But also, I think there's going to be a cycle. We're going to go through a period where, and we already are in a period where a lot of people are using their jobs. So, you know, a lot of copywriters, illustrators, artists, sort of like who are working professionally in those roles, rather than necessarily in the creative world, they're going to lose their jobs. They may come back when people realize that AI is perhaps not giving the results that are required. From an artistic point of view, I think life is going to get harder. We've already seen on Amazon, this has been a problem for a long time, a lot of AI generated slop, self-published books. So I think the landscape's going to become complicated. I think people are going to need to become a lot more aware of what they, whether something has come from AI or from a human, and where personally they draw the line. You know, if people don't want AI generated slop, then we have to reject it at every possible opportunity and support actual humans who are working in the creative industries.
Thank you, Sue.
I'll just add something controversial that I think humans historically always tend to protect things that they think are very human, only to find out that they're actually not just human. So they're not just things that humans do. So I think Tiana's saying that art is very or being artistic is very human. We might be wrong about that. We have to wait and see.
That's a great story prompt, at least. Thank you, Cavill.
Well, I was going to say I stopped eating octopus when I discovered that they decorate their homes. So that was a line for me, artificial one, I admit, but nevertheless, it was enough to kind of move me across that line. Look, the way, and we've kind of zeroed back in on the mainstream generative AI stuff. I think where we are today is, and I was talking about this with our head of AI at the financial institution where I work, because we were presenting to a bunch of CEOs in private equity about this subject, and I was the question I put to him was, having both of us having read the mathematical papers about how these things do their statistics, I was like, the problem is that the very definition, the very mathematical structure of these means they don't get better. They just do what they do. And he was like, yeah, that's right. And we were both like, well, eventually they'll just eat themselves, because they'll create data that then goes in as data, and that data will be nonsense. And they just are what they are. They don't get any better. And we were both like, well, what does that mean? How do you improve that? And that was a thing where we didn't have an answer, because all the major AI type of approaches right now use that statistical prediction mechanism. And those are the banks of the river. And I think that's really that creates a real challenge that people I don't think we talk about enough, which is, in order to create something that actually looks more like what we mean when we talk about AI, we have to essentially use really different types of models, fundamentally different types of models, because these aren't going to get better and better generation by generation, because the fundamental structure of them doesn't allow for them to progress in the way that people think progress works. Which is why I come back to the use models in other areas are really powerful, because that type of structure is really, really good for what people want them to do. Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think we've got a long way to go. I don't think it replaces art, but I don't think it comes down to what the AI is doing. I don't think it comes down to what the model is doing. Whether people are being paid to do art is down to other people, and it always will be. And I don't think, there are going to be scammers out there. There are going to be executives who think, I can do this cheaper, and they may or may not come to regret their decisions. But it's always going to be about people. It's never going to be about whether the AI can actually do it.
Thank you, Stu. And it's a very human thing for time to be an illusion, as time has just moved very fast for us, and I'm bringing us to the end here of our hour already. So thank you so much to all of you for this absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you to all of our audience as well. There's a lot of you here today. I really appreciate you taking time out to come and see us. I believe that there is a short survey link in the Q&A or in the chat. And well, I'm sure you've seen many surveys. I can guarantee you that this is the best one you will ever fill in. So do take just a moment. And on behalf of the King's Artificial Intelligence Institute, they'll be hugely grateful for that feedback for future events. We've had so much there in the comments, so much to go on. I certainly want to take a little time to kind of process that. And I hope we might actually try to pull some of that together as future story prompts or something similar that we can release for the Clarke Award in the future, either just as ourselves or as part of our ongoing collaboration with King's College London across this year and into 2026. So if anyone wants to kind of keep track on that, if you go to clarkeaward.com, you can sign up for our newsletter, and that's one place where we can keep people updated on things that we are planning like this if you're not signed up already. And I'm going to leave you with one final thought from another famous science fiction writer. If we started with Arthur, I'm going to finish with Ursula K. Le Guin, who says, I quote, "A machine is more blameless, more sinless even than any animal. It has no intentions whatsoever but our own." And perhaps there's another story prompt in there for all of our science fiction writers. Wishing you all the best. May science fiction writing and all other creative practices continue long into the future. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.